With the dinner kit delivery service UCOOK, you can have sets of freshly packed ingredients delivered to your office, ready for you to cook your gourmet meal with you at home. Now, joining us from Cape Town to explain how all of this works and how it officially started is David Torr, co-founder of UCOOK. David, good to have you with us today, but give us a clear explanation as to how UCOOK actually works.
Hi there, Googlet here. Thanks for having me. So UCOOK is essentially a dinner kit delivery service. So basic premise being we've got a selection of recipes that exist online every week, separated into 3 different dietary categories. Those current categories are low carb, rustic, and vegetarian. And then you as the prospective consumer can go online, either choose between categories or buy into a specific category. And then what we do is we amalgamate all of those ingredients and deliver them all to you perfectly portioned and packaged with recipe cards and videos that guide you through that prospective cooking process.
I'm assuming one must have been a bachelor to be able to source such inspiration to start a company like this, but give us background as to how it was actually formed and how you turned this into a viable business.
Sure. So, during my travels, I traveled overseas for quite a bit, and I've always been a kind of passionate foodie at heart. I'd like to say I'm reasonable in the kitchen, but that's probably a bit of an exaggeration. I didn't necessarily actually possess the time working, quite a kind of high-paced, job to go out and actually source ingredients. And I came across a concept called HelloFresh abroad that really just perfectly kind of synergized with my lifestyle at the time and allowed me to kind of do what I love, which is prepare kind of home-cooked food of real quality, but then mitigated the hassles associated with the process. And they kind of did all the kind of schleppy stuff that I wasn't necessarily into, and then just left me to do the stuff that I enjoyed. The idea I thought was fairly viable coming back to SA. I was kind of left looking at what my next move was, and I looked at, there were some real kind of success stories, I suppose, in the kind of South African food landscape, in a time whereby the economy wasn't exactly, hugely strong, and I thought that was quite interesting. The likes of Woolworths, Yappie Chef, and others that were really making a boom in this food space. And I started, doing a bit of kind of investigative research and found that, South Africa is actually a place whereby aspirational food brands, specifically in the kind of luxe environment, really don't necessarily, they're not hugely dependent on the kind of economic climate, and people really are willing to pay premium, specifically kind of LSMs, I suppose, 7 to 10, for really good quality produce. And we've also got people here that just generally love cooking. The likes of, say, Tim Noakes's cookbook, I think, was the best-selling book of South Africa's history. So yeah, UCOOK started in a very humble garage in Newlands. And slowly but surely, we've progressed into something that I'm quite proud of to date.
It is something to be proud of, certainly. And David, you paint a picture here on your website, too, of how ethical you are in some of how you sourced your produce and, of course, an introduction to some of your suppliers. But talk to us as to how these relationships have had to be formed, how you need to monitor the quality of the goods that you source, and, of course, the logistics involved to deliver some of these goods to your clients.
Yeah, so I think that's also a big kind of beneficial factor just generally in the dinner kit environment. We want to create transparency in the buying of actual quality produce and delivering it to the consumer. We really stand stoically behind the whole ethical eating movement and try to source organic produce wherever possible. And it was very difficult initially attempting to kind of get together the supplier networks, because it's quite limited in terms of what we're wanting to acquire and what was available on the market. We actually happened to stumble across an organization called Abelimi Benzimkaya, which is an incredible organization that essentially generates jobs for people in impoverished communities by allowing them to develop their own little vegetable gardens and then create a means for them to sell them on the open market. So we managed to acquire, they're our kind of a biggest organic vendor. And then we've got a lot of kind of small batch guys that exist on the peripheries of bigger cities that are able to supply us with select crops, because we can kind of pre-plan a few months in advance. But that is definitely a big issue, is kind of getting that operational chain right. We're currently based in Cape Town, soon to open up a fulfillment center in Johannesburg. And hopefully, you know, as time progresses, we'd like to have nodes that exist all around the country that will enable us to really kind of leverage distribution, and hopefully it's
very briefly though,
get competitive with our pricing.
Speaking of pricing, that's exactly my next question as to how does it compare to individuals going to their regular supermarket and actually purchasing these goods themselves?
So that's a very interesting point, because you know, we've actually got a lot of customers that have come to us and have said, look, we're saving them huge amounts of money. And it might not necessarily seem like that on first glance, because I suppose the bachelor and the couples boxes are probably quite expensive when you look at it on a per meal basis. But when you factor in the fact that all of our meats are pasture-reared, everything's kind of grass-fed, you know, about 30 to 40% of our product is organic on any given day, and there's absolutely no wastage. It becomes quite an interesting thing to look at, because when you traditionally wanted to go to, you know, the supermarket and purchase the kind of quite exotic ingredients for a dish that you found in a recipe book, you end up with a bottle of spice that sits in your kind of pantry for 3 to 6 months, never used, or a big bag of lettuce that starts, you know, slowly turning blue in your fridge. With UCOOK, there's none of that. So I actually think it's very price competitive if you look at it on a per meal basis.
David, thank you so much for your time and providing analysis with regard to UCOOK. Looking forward to how your business develops in the future. That was David Torr, co-founder of UCOOK.